So we're now going to, delegates, move to hearing from our Minister, Gabrielle Upton. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Gabrielle Upton, who we're very pleased has come down here today. I might add, she's come down on a sitting day, which is very good of her, so we're very grateful for that in particular. Since her appointment, delegates will just have some order. I know people are coming in because they do want to hear from the Minister. Since her appointment to the portfolio, we've been very pleased to be able to work very constructively with Gabrielle Upton on all things local government. We have welcomed her to several Local Government New South Wales events, including today, and we thank her for her support and work with us. We also, of course, as we said to the Premier yesterday, welcome the change of direction the Berejiklian government took on forced amalgamations after her appointment as the Minister for Local Government, and also pleased that the government has moved forward on joint organisations and continue to work with her on future funding for those, but also importantly on making sure that councils have choice about the joint organisations they wish to join, or indeed whether they wish to join at all. It's been a pleasure for me, in fact, to have known Gabrielle Upton for many years and worked together constructively on many issues, but particularly now to be reunited over the important issue of local government. So that's been fantastic. And of course, you would all know, before taking on the role earlier this year, the Minister held the positions of Attorney-General in New South Wales, the first female to do so, Minister for Family and Community Services, Minister for Sport and Recreation, and Parliamentary Secretary for Tertiary Education and Skills. So delegates, please join with me in welcoming the Hon Gabrielle Upton MP up to the stage.
Good afternoon, delegates. And it's great to join you. I really genuinely mean that. It isn't a sitting day. I would have looked for an excuse to miss sittings in Parliament, I've got to say. They're not sometimes very easy, but we go back to Parliament tomorrow, and today is the day in the lead up from that. But I did want to thank you for the invitation to join you, which I warmly welcome. And firstly, I wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I wanted to acknowledge Linda, who I've known for quite a number of years. We both won't tell how many years that is. We've not aged at all since that time at university. To Councillor Keith Rhodes, immediate past president, who I think might be here today, who I worked with until Linda took the reins. To all the board members who I know have joined us. To Councillor David O'Loughlin, President of the Australian Local Government Association, who I see at many of the Environment Ministers' meetings when we meet, as we are going to in November. To Councillor Kevin Mack, of course, the Mayor of Albury City Council, to all the mayors, to the deputy mayors and the councillors, and everybody else who has joined the conference from yesterday evening. I wanted to start by congratulating Local Government New South Wales for hosting this wonderful conference, this annual conference, the red carpet event for local government in Albury. I was reading the program last night and I saw the Mayor Mack describe it as the jewel in the crown of southern New South Wales, and I've had an opportunity since I've been here early this morning to get about, which has been fantastic. And I went to the Wonga wetlands. For those of you who know this area, just extraordinary, the restoration work with my Environment Minister hat on that's been done there, working with the council and working with wastewater. To Saguna Public School, where I saw another environmental project that the young kids are doing to look after little froglets out there, which are unique to this area. And then earlier on I went to Jindera, which those of you who are local would know is just an amazing historic place. Where as Heritage Minister, another of the ministries that I have, I was able to have a look with the local member, Greg Applin, at some of the investment that we've made into one of the blacksmith repair sheds, which goes back so many years into the history of this region. So, no doubt, and I've read the over 99 resolutions that you've been debating and followed all the tweeting and social media throughout the day. This is a great opportunity, as it is once a year, to reflect on your achievements, which are vast, debate the hot topics, and work out your future priorities as a sector. And I know the Premier was here yesterday afternoon. It was wonderful to see that she was seeing some of the homegrown entertainment that you have here. I think it's the fruit fly acrobats, which look fantastic. And of course, she had an incredibly hectic schedule, as you'd imagine, over the weekend with the Royals and with the launch of the Invictus Games. But I know that this was the highlight of the weekend, being amongst friends in this wonderful regional part of New South Wales. So some reflections on the year to date. And in my mind, there's absolutely no doubt that our local government sector is going from strength to strength. I wanted to congratulate the newly elected and re-elected mayors and deputy mayors of the 61 councils where those elections were held just last month. And those councils and the balance of our 128 councils in New South Wales significantly contribute to our state economy. And I think, and I'm a local member, which is where a good kind of overview or insight to what you do comes from, into day-to-day things, you are really the arm of government closest to our community. And it is still, of course, those old adages about, roads, rates and rubbish. It is. But you also provide landmark facilities, regional arts centres, stunning beachfront promenades, world-class sporting and recreational facilities and premier parklands across our state. And I know, again, because I'm a local member in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, that local councils have oversight as managers of state government assets. And we really do appreciate the work that you do close to the community on managing those state assets. Like Bondi Beach, which is close to my home and in my electorate, I mean, that is a beachfront asset on a world stage. So I salute you for that work you do. It is often unappreciated, but not by the New South Wales Government and from the Premier and myself. And those facilities, of course, not only benefit local community members, but they benefit international tourists and tourists from all across Australia who take the benefit of the facilities which you manage. You host sporting events, recreational cultural events that draw people from across the state. And the first ministry I had was the Sports Minister. As my husband said, it was the best ministry I ever had because of the events we would often go to see that were of great interest to him as a sports fanatic. But I know that state championships are often battled out on local council sporting fields. You foster junior talent. And take, for example, where I started my brief athletic career, Little Athletics, under fives, they all take place on council playing fields. You incubate sports stars, and I can think of many elite athletes who have had their first test of sport and their nurturing on those fields which you manage so generously to help create those international stages that our sporting stars then go on to. And I also wanted to reflect on the economic achievements that you have, because nearly 90% of all councils now meet the New South Wales Government's key financial benchmarks. On top of that, 84% reported a financial surplus for 2016-17, and that is a massive increase from the 34% that were in surplus 5 years earlier. There have too been significant decreases in the infrastructure backlog, from $7.3 billion in 2011-12 to nearly half of that, just under $4 billion, half of that, in 2016-17. And as a former person who worked in banking, and I then worked before that as a lawyer, I know that financials sometimes make everybody's eyes glaze over, but they are incredibly important in being the resource from which you go on to serve your communities. And I do want to congratulate you for what is a magnificent scorecard of financial rectitude and of delivery and of achievements. Now, as we all know, as do state governments, local government faces a demand for not only that improved financial performance, which is borne out by the facts and figures, but increased accountability. And that's why, of course, we have introduced together measures that are going to ensure that we're all at the forefront of that trend. I think it's fair to say, like with company directors, with MPs of state parliament, the roles and responsibilities that those of us who are involved in governance at every level across the state, that has increased, the scrutiny has increased. And so we want to ensure together that elected representatives, councillors, have the skills, the standards, the conduct, the knowledge to serve the communities in the best way that I know you all seek to do. And I just wanted to bring to your attention, of course, the recently released induction and professional development guidelines. Councils, of course, will soon be required to deliver that induction training and continual professional development programs for councillors. I know many of you are doing that already, but it's to support you through making that a more universally embraced obligation on the part of local government. We like to think that we're not placing these obligations on you to do all of that work alone. And Tim Hurst, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Local Government, has been caught up getting here, but I know he works very closely with me through his senior executives, working with you to make sure that we assist you and we know what you're thinking. And they launched their new council engagement team early this year. So it was a way we saw of working with you closely, getting that feedback on the ground. And together those 6 council engagement managers, when I added it up, have more than 70 years of experience in local government. So they bring with them a range of skills, I'm hoping you'll find, experience in governance, in community engagement, environmental planning and sustainability, strategy and policy, and integrated planning and reporting. And I'm hoping through that regular and ongoing contact with you and with our joint organisations, that team will identify and help address emerging issues before they become big issues, and also at the same time, which I've asked them to do, to recognise the different needs of different councils in different areas across New South Wales. There is information, I'm hoping, that's flowing to you and assistance on the state government's policy priorities and programs, so they're another way of getting that news to you directly. And I'm told that team has so far visited more than 90% of the councils across the state. They've met with many general managers and senior executives in your councils. So my request to you is to please use them, reach out for them if you haven't already. Think of them as your consultants. They're on the state government payroll to provide that on-tap expertise should you need it in any of the areas where you think you need assistance. We really want your feedback on their assistance to you because it is about assistance to you. The Premier touched on this, I know, when she spoke with you last night, but we are always looking for ways to improve the working relationship between state and local councils. I think more than any other of the tiers of government, state government and local government are tied together in a really good way for delivering for local communities. And of course there's a network of our joint organisations in regional North New South Wales who are doing just that. There are now 13 JOs, as we call them, comprising 85 member councils. And I really think, because I've met with a number of these JOs and I met on the, I think it was mid-August, with the chairs of the inaugural JOs in Parliament House, I really got the sense that they feel, and they are indeed, in a much stronger bargaining position when they come to negotiate with state government and with federal government to deliver for local communities. It also means that those regional communities can be true partnerships with us in delivering what was announced recently as our economic vision for regional New South Wales. I have been gratified, I've got to say, together with our Deputy Premier, that more than 90% of the eligible councils have joined a JO, and I really wanted to thank those councils who are here today for stepping up to that opportunity. I know we had our 5 trial JOs. They too have, of course, signed up again, but there are many others of you that have come forward. It was voluntary to participate, but I think at 90% we have those councils really recognising the value, or at least trying to give it a go to recognise that value in coming together on more strategic projects across your regions. I've got to say, I think, although it's early days, it's one of the best examples of how a government and a sector can co-design a new way of working with one another. When I met with the inaugural meeting of chairs of JOs and their executive officers, they were talking about big ticket items, which is the conversation that we want to have: water supply, infrastructure, skills development, job opportunities, tourism, export opportunities. That is exactly the conversation that we should be having together and be having with the federal government as a team. You know, that's what the JO concept was all about, and it is collaboration at a strategic level on regional projects. The New South Wales Government will continue, of course, to support you all in a financial way, and I did want to bring attention to the fact that since 2011, when the coalition government came to power in New South Wales, there has been an investment of over $1 billion in New South Wales councils through the Office of Local Government. That has been a 40% increase in annual funding, whether it's through roads and maritime services, family and community services, whether it's through the Office of Local Government, the many arms of the policy areas in state government. It also includes investments, of course, from the Local Infrastructure Renewal Scheme, from the Stronger Communities Fund, from the Companion Animal Fund and the Innovation Fund. And there is $7 million to assist you with developing plans of management for Crown land, just under $5 million under the Local Government Skills Strategy to help with issues that we all have across the state and nationally with an ageing workforce, with skill shortages, and of course the $47 million package to help councils and industry respond to the issues around contaminated recyclable waste across the nation. And yesterday, I think you saw a video piece here from one of my colleagues, the Minister for Planning, who on behalf of the New South Wales Government announced the second round of the low-cost loans initiative. There is $20 million of funding to make it easier for councils to fund local infrastructure projects and accelerate, in this case, housing delivery. Now, we're doing that, for those of you not familiar with this program, by cutting the cost of loans for infrastructure projects, enabling housing supply through a 50% interest payment refund. The first round that was introduced this year was announced and gave $10 million, half the amount that's now on offer. And that meant, when I had a look at the results, that there were 10 councils able to deliver more than $165 million worth of infrastructure at a reduced cost to help their local ratepayers, their local residents. Now, on the new version 2 of that loan that's available and was announced yesterday, there's until May next year to apply for applications under that fund, and I would encourage you strongly to apply to that fund to deliver those dividends into your local communities. So I wanted to leave my comments there to say that together we are the key to the ongoing success of delivering for our local communities, who frankly sometimes when they come to my office as a local MP, come to you as councillors, come to the GMs, come to the staff that are at the front line of council offices. They really don't mind where the solution is. They want to know there's a solution, or at least a pathway for them to get good information, or at least to try for an outcome. So they come to us all. They don't mind where that solution is found, and so by local councils working with the state government, we can better serve our communities, who we're all committed to serve. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you.
Thanks very much, Minister. We really appreciate that, and we noticed also you've released a circular economy policy and discussion paper today, so I'm sure we'll be interested to get the details of that. And thanks also for agreeing to take some questions. That's fantastic. So I think we've got a question from microphone 10, and then 7, and then 6. So first, microphone 10.
Yes, thank you, Minister. The government's doing a lot in the waste space, and it's a key theme for us tomorrow and has been previously. But I have to raise the issue of single-use plastic bags, which New South Wales stands alone now as not having banned. The association advocates for that banning and has for some time, and I wondered if you might comment on what the obstacles to such a ban would be, or when and if we might be brought in line with the rest of the country on this.
So I welcome your question. Thank you. Is that
Oh,
You up
sorry,
there? I can't
my
see you.
name's, yeah, Kathy Griff from Bigger Valley Shire.
Okay, Kathy, look, thank you very much for your question. So the state government's position on this is that we welcome the decision by retailers in phasing out the single-use plastic bags. Of course, there's still the issue of the above 35 micron, more heavy boutique plastic bags that are still part of the environment and part of our consuming cycle. So we've been happy to commend the retailers on taking that first step. Single-use plastic bags are visible, but they're only a very small proportion of plastics in our environment, and that's why the state government embraced a program through Return and Earn that more directly addressed what is a plastic in a drink container, plastic, that represents a much larger proportion of the litter stream that we see on our parklands, in our beaches, in our waterways. And so the Return and Earn scheme was introduced, almost a year ago. I know councils have been really involved in rolling that program across the state. We've had over 830 million drink containers returned and over 686 collection points across the state. So our decision was to embrace an item of plastic that was a much larger part of the plastic litter stream in our environment. And when I visited Sagoona Public School today, I met the principal there, who was fantastic, Nadine, and she talked about a really live community example of how Return and Earn was being used by her own kids to get the 10-cent refund to purchase a cavoodle, which her family had wanted for some time, and she tasked her kids with using Return and Earn as a way in which they could raise the pocket money to do that. So it's really created an incentive amongst our young people, amongst our communities, to be able to embrace the larger part of our litter stream around plastic, and that is the way the government has chosen to respond to that issue. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. So microphone 7.
Thank you, Minister. IPART handed to the previous Local Government Minister its report on compliance and the red tape review in April 2016, and also its review of the local government rating system in December 2016. So these are both major reports for local government, and indeed this conference has moved a couple of motions demanding that our board pursue these reports to be handed down and the associated recommendations to be acted on. So my question is, can you please tell us when those reports will please be released? We're not cynical here in local government, but when government sits on reports for 2 years, we really do start to ask questions, what's going on?
So thank you for the question, and it's fair to say there were a number of issues that had very different views on it within those reviews, and they are still under government consideration. So thank you for your question.
Okay, microphone 6. Microphone 6.
Hello, Minister.
Where am I now?
Over here.
Hello.
Hi, Cal Asfor, Mayor of Canterbury Bankstown. Minister, we were forcibly amalgamated a few years ago, and as a result, one of our, and I've written to you about this in the past, as a result, one of our special rate variations from Canterbury was due to end next year, and we understand that the only way for that to be continued, considering we can't ask for a special rate variation, is through ministerial regulation that only you can do. And just wondering, when are we going to hear from you as to whether you're prepared to do that?
So out of the mergers, we didn't want to create issues for existing council areas with raising of their rates. So as you know, there was the rate freeze for the period to smooth that over. And then beyond that period, special rate variations will be considered.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Thanks. Phyllis Miller, Mayor of Hawkes, just here. Woo.
Oh, hello.
Minister Upton, we are doing our floodplain study at the moment, and thank you very much for the funding that we have received through the Office of Environment and Heritage. Unfortunately, 2 years ago we had a flood in 2016, which held up our flood study. No one could go and do levels. There was so much water around. Now we've been put on a really strict time frame by the Office of Environment and Heritage. I don't think you have got the message properly about what's gone on there.
Okay.
And our flood study is only taking into consideration up to 2012. Now, we had a major flood in 2016. We desperately need those figures to be put into that flood study. And we're being forced to adopt something that will be 6 years out of date from the day we adopt it, unless we can get the 2016 levels, flood levels in there. And there was a very valid reason why we've gone over time, and we've been knocked back for the 94,000 that we need to incorporate that. So I'm begging you, can you go back and reconsider that? I will write to you with the details, but it's terribly important that we get our flood study right.
So look, I thank you for raising that with me. Happy to hear from you and take that on notice. I'm not familiar with the particular thing that you're raising, but it sounds like something we need to look at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Microphone 2.
Dorothy Robinson, Armidale Regional Council. Most of New South Wales has very clean air, but national air quality standards in Armidale were exceeded 31 times at the New South Wales Government Monitoring Station and 63 times in one residential area. Now, cleaning up our air would generate tremendous health benefits and boost our economic development, as demonstrated by Launceston's wood smoke programme, that reduced deaths in winter from lung diseases by 28% and deaths from heart attacks and strokes by 20%. What funding can you offer for a similar programme in Armidale? For example, diverting some of the money earmarked for new infrastructure, if new infrastructure would generate fewer benefits than the reductions in heart attacks, strokes, cancers, colds and flu and other lung diseases, as well as the improvements in children's health, as outlined by the World Health Organization.
Well, I thank you for that question. I'll put my Environment Minister hat on, I think, because that's more, it speaks to that portfolio. So air quality is an issue, particularly particulates, as you know. You know, the 10.5 and the 2.5 particulates, the 10.5 being below the visible level of particulates we'd see in the air. But we take this issue incredibly seriously, and we have set up additional monitoring stations to be able to monitor in those areas of the state where we know that basically wood-fired heating is the major pollutant that creates some of those particulates. And we know that local councils have a particular role to play in monitoring that. And you might remember the state government brought in a policy where we were saying and encouraging councils that when there is any more new wood-fired heaters that are being installed, they have to meet the new requirements, because there are national air quality standards across the nation. So I know you have particular issues in the Northern Tablelands, and I believe there are some things. I can't recall to mind exactly how we're helping the local council, who has a big educational role, of course, on the ground to do that. But we have installed new air quality monitors across the state. I think there's one in Gundagai that we opened early this year. There's one in Central Sydney that we're looking to open up in collaboration with City of Sydney Council. So it is an issue. Your particular circumstances I don't have to hand, but I agree with you, it is an issue, and that both state government but also on the ground local councils have a big role to play in making sure that's enforced at a local level.
Thank you. Now, we've got a range of people at our microphones. I'm going to cut off the questions where we've got people up, because otherwise we're going to go well into afternoon tea. Microphone 5.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your address. A motion was passed earlier on today in relation to a subject you raised, that is that local councils have to do plans of management on Crown-owned land that council operate.
6.
The funding is totally inadequate. $33,000 or $30,000 as the base. A plan of management of it can be done, and we may be able to do some generically, will cost between $25,000 and $30,000 per plan. We have 60 on the Southern Highlands, Windsor Caribbean. There are other councils throughout the state who have much bigger parcels of Crown land, and the time frame is 3 years. Totally inadequate. We are still trying to work through plans of management in relation to open spaces, parks and gardens. that was put upon council, say, 7 years ago. We're still working through those. And the money that was given then, I think, was about $70,000. We would be spending upwards towards $500,000 out of ratepayers' money. And this will be ratepayers' money. Can you review that amount of money and the timeframes that you've imposed on councils, please?
Yes, look, I have heard similar concerns when I met with various ROCs and JOs. Paul Toole is the Crown's Land Minister, and I know he's had conversations with councils about their concerns about the inadequate funding. I'm happy to take that on notice and raise it with him, having heard that from you. I think it's a genuine concern that you're not the only one to represent to me. I don't have, that's not my portfolio, Crown Lands, but obviously it's tied in, and that's a consistent message I'm getting, that it's just too tight and not enough money. So I'm happy to convey that to Paul.
Thank you.
Take that on notice.
Thank you. Now, everybody's going to keep their questions very short, aren't they? So we can get through the last couple. 9 and then 4. 9.
Sarah and Jai, Byron Shire Council. Thank you, Minister, for coming along. Yesterday I asked the Premier a question in relation to the remuneration of councillors and mayors across the state, and she seemed genuinely unaware of the situation we face. Essentially, I sit on the board of a $100 million company. I sit in 20 to 30 hours of meetings in a month, have agendas that go up to around 2,000 pages between all the committees and panels, the libraries. So after all the cost shifting and responsibility shifting that has gone onto local government, we are not just dealing with rates, roads and rubbish. Our responsibilities are enormous, and to do our job properly, we need to be remunerated properly and have superannuation. It works out to between $10 and $14 an hour before tax generally at the moment, and I just think these people here before you that dedicate themselves to their communities need to be recognised better, and ask that after today we voted unanimously to have this looked at in more depth, and just asking if you'll be able to be a really strong advocate for us to make sure that we can have more diversity here. It particularly affects women whose superannuation is already low. And so I'm just asking for your support in being a strong advocate for us. We understand it's a privilege to serve our communities, but I also don't think we should be penalised for that in the long term.
I hear you. Thank you very much for raising that. I do know that all of you go above and beyond what's required of you, and I thank you genuinely for that. You do it because you want to help your local communities. It's often at a cost to your family and personal life. So I do hear your concerns there, and I'm happy to take them on board. I haven't had that often represented to me, but I hear by the applause here that it's something that's really heartfelt. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you for that, Minister. So 4, 6, 4, 7 and 10, and then we're going to afternoon tea. 4, Dominic.
Thank you, Minister, for agreeing to take questions. My question is in relation to your environmental and your local government portfolios. Has there been any discussions with your counterparts in the Victorian government so that the issues raised by native title and Crown lands and local government in areas along the Murray River for Aboriginal mobs like the Yorta Yorta, whose country goes across the river and therefore covers both New South Wales and Victorian territory? Has there been any discussions about that Crown land and native title issue? And because there are federal issues involved, given that you are also member for Vaucluse, will there be any assistance sought from the new federal member for Wentworth in that regard?
Well, of course, we don't quite know who the new federal member for Wentworth is, but so we'll excuse the Minister if she leaves a part of that aside, but thank you.
So, Dominic, thank you for raising that question and for your service on Waverley Council. So, look, I'm not familiar with the exact issues. Native title sits between a number of ministerial portfolios, including the Attorney-General, the Industries Minister, but I'm happy to take that question on notice. I know there are Indigenous communities that straddle the border. I'm not familiar with exactly where that's up to or the solution to the problem that you're saying there is, but I'm happy to take that on notice. And thank you for raising the question.
Okay. Thank you. 6.
Hello, Minister. Thanks for being here today. I just want to let you know that you put a smile on a number of people's faces. Councillor Jeff Sundstrom from Central Coast Council, by the way. You put a smile on a number of people's faces today by appearing here and by taking some questions, not the least of our Chair, Councillor Scott. My question for you isn't a question on my own behalf, or nor is it of my council's behalf. I'd like to ask you a question on behalf of the people of Tumbarumba. They have a delegation that travelled here today. They were pleased to come in and attend during the proceedings here earlier on today, and they'd be very impressed if you would give them a few minutes of your precious time on your way out the door. So my question for you from them is, will you please come and speak to us?
Look, very happy. We've met before on a number of occasions in my office, not that recently in fact. Jim Molan has met with me and made your case. I'm very familiar with the circumstances and the concerns that you have. Obviously, the councils can demerge. There are provisions under the existing Act. They haven't changed. But of course, I'm happy to speak with your colleagues, as I have on other occasions. I do have to be on a plane at... What time? Yeah, so if you want to come with me as we walk out, very happy to do that, but I've done that. Happy to continue to hear your representations.
So the Minister does have to get on a plane, so we're going to just leave there. We've got 3 people we've promised to ask questions. Friends, we're just going to get you to state a very brief point and then get the Minister to respond to all of them. So, 7.
Yes, Minister. If the government is not in a position to increase the amount of money returned to councils that is taken off us in the form of the waste levy, would the Minister be open to individual councils with specific financial problems but yet facing the need to confront compelling waste reduction problems? Would you be willing for those councils to be granted a greater return specifically to that council to enable that council to meet that problem?
Thank you, Councillor Matson. And Mayor of Bega, Christie, final one.
10.
10.
When can councils expect the integrity package to be formally released and adopted? So code of meeting practice, code of conduct.
Okay, well that's a more straightforward one. So obviously there's a reg that needs to be signed to have the professional development code and the code of conduct apply formally. So that's imminent. The meeting code of practice is imminent. You've all had opportunities to input into that, and of course I note there was a resolution just before I came up here about the webcasting of council meetings, which I'm very strongly in support of. And will be part of that meeting code. So you will see those. It's I've got to say the Local Government Act's quite complicated and it's quite a long act, but the way they're activated is by making regulation, which is imminent on my part. But obviously we'll need to publish the meeting procedure code for you to understand as the final version, which will then switch on. But for some of the provisions there will be a lead time for that. So you'll have a chance to kind of get ready before it actually activates in terms of meeting process. And as to the waste levy issue that was raised with me, I know that's been the subject of a number of resolutions here today and discussion. And, you know, the waste levy is part of that. A third of the waste levy that's gathered comes to my portfolio, and almost $1 billion of that is put into the Waste Less Recycle More package, which is available, I think, of community recycling centres, I think of community education, I think all those funding streams that come from that. I mean, it is one of the biggest funding packages across government. I can't think of another one in my portfolio that represents that dollar amount. So that is meant to represent a good, sizeable, strong package of measures to support you in getting back to you. And they're contestable, of course, so you've got to have good projects, but it's a way in which councils who meet the probity and other requirements of that contestable funding get some of that waste levy returned. I mean, let's not forget that the waste levy is there to disencourage people dumping waste. It is there for a reason. And look, if there are any special circumstances, obviously around the issues that we've had out of contaminated recycling not being accepted by China, and now we hear Malaysia, I mean, they are not new issues. They've been around for a long, 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 long time. And the government has assisted with a $47 million package to work with councils and other people in that industry to make sure we can help you through what's a transition that was coming for quite some time. And there's also funding that's available under that. So if you have particular circumstances that you think are not covered by the almost $1 billion of funding through Waste Less, Recycle More and through the funding we announced in May, the $47 million package for the China sword-related issues, I'm always willing to hear that. Always willing to hear that. So I want to thank you, everybody, for your welcome, for your thoughts. I genuinely welcome the questions that you have asked of me. I've taken 2 or 3, I think, on notice. And thank you for sunny, lovely Albury for welcoming us all here. I wish you all the well in your deliberations through to tonight and tomorrow morning, and for the work that you'll do on behalf of all of our communities across New South Wales.
Thanks, Minister. I'm going to ask Ben Shields to very quickly thank you. Mayor of Dubbo.
Thank you, Minister. I'd certainly, on behalf of the Board of Local Government New South Wales, I'll certainly like to thank you for attending today's conference. Minister, let today be as a gesture of a newfound dialogue between Local Government New South Wales and your ministry. It's certainly the case where we are both on the same side, and that is the ratepayers, taxpayers and indeed the residents of New South Wales. And it's fantastic that you have been here today to join us and share some concerns. We can share some concerns that we do have with yourself. And I know you've got to flap your wings right now and fly away, so I'll be short. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
So, delegates, we are